Ladies and gentlemen, children of all wages, welcome back to the show. We are live again. Hopefully everything is going all right. I switched streaming platforms, so there were some technical stuff I had to deal with today, or the past couple days, and also had to charge my battery for my camera because I switched cameras, and unfortunately the power cord that would fit in this camera unfortunately it has this weird plastic thing that makes the plug-in for my cord a little too short, so I got to find another similar cable that has a little bit longer of a plug-in that I can actually plug into power. So I spent most of the day charging my batteries so I can do this show. I was hoping to do a little sooner, but such is the technological world. And boy, I swear, with the way technology treats me sometimes, it's kind of ironic that, I am in the technological industry, formerly in TV news and filmmaking and all sorts of, things like that I would have these issues. I'm like a walking EMP strike, apparently, but if anything is wrong, just let me know in the chat. For those of you who are actually here, I know basically there's no one, especially since it's Sunday at 9:30. Everyone's getting ready to go to bed, but the show must go on, and I will do it anyway. So that's how it is. So whenever you see this, whether it's in the replay or live, thank you for watching, and see you later. No, I'm just kidding. Like and subscribe and do all that, and share your thoughts in the chat or in the comments. And keep the conversation going, because part of this is you guys, and you guys being in the community and representing the duck community and being actually part of the conversation. This obviously isn't like ESPN where we just listen to people talk. I call them the hot take merchants, but apparently I'm the hot take merchant, which maybe we'll get into in a little bit, where there might be, issues. But if you also haven't seen the interview that I did with my dad regarding everything sort of going on in the college football business landscape, things like NIL, conference realignment, and sort of the future of college football, I left the solo interview. I attached it to the Oklahoma State recap and look ahead into Northwestern show, which was basically on game day. But I attached that to the end of that show, last episode basically. But I did upload it separately, where it's just the entire conversation that we had. I think it was a phenomenal conversation. I really enjoyed it. Not only catching up with my dad a little bit, because he lives all the way over deep in the heart of Texas, but also just discussing things in athletics and colleges, because I know there's a lot of people that think that the new era of college football, the post-NIL era, is bad for college football, and then there are others that think that it's good or are neutral and sort of wait and see. And my dad has been in the college administrative side of things for over 20 years now. He worked very hard to get there, and he was there when, talking to people and being a part of people that sort of saw money that involved athletic departments and things like that. So he has a bit of insider knowledge about the business of college athletics and specifically in this case, the business of college football, but how that also relates to the school as well. But nonetheless, I think it's a very great conversation, a good conversation, and I'm hoping to involve him in the future. So give him a lot of positive comments and attaboys for his appearance on it. He didn't have to do that, but he decided it was a fun thing to do, and it was fun. So, moving on, though, to the recap of the game that just happened yesterday, Northwestern versus Oregon. Oregon was at Northwestern in their tiny makeshift temporary stadium while their other one, I guess, is being built. I originally have thought that the small high school stadium that they're playing at now by Lake Michigan was the place that they were going to build or reconstruct the new stadium. Obviously, someone on Twitter corrected me in that, and it's actually going to be at a different location. The near Lake Michigan is just the temporary location. Although that would be freaking awesome if they made that the location. I don't know. It looked beautiful. I would have liked to have been there, even though, everything was kind of small and intimate, if you will. There was really no atmosphere. I obviously cover high school football down here in San Diego, and frankly, there was probably more atmosphere at those stadiums and maybe more people than at the Northwestern game. But in regards to location, that looked awesome. So it's unfortunate. However, it seems like it might be susceptible to harsh weather, which apparently that was the case on Saturday morning and wasn't sort of an issue in the game with once the rain kind of subsided and the sun poked out, there was still some heavy winds, which makes sense because it's near a body of water. Usually if you're near a big body of water, there's just a wind factor. And for me personally, ironically, because I live next to the ocean, heavy winds kind of irritate me. It feels like God is blowing in my face, and like like when a dog gets mad or snaps at you when you blow in their face. That's kind of how I am with heavy winds, but I know some people like it. But so I think that was somewhat of a factor, the sort of sloppy weather, if you will. So let's start from the beginning though. I missed the first quarter because I was asleep, and seems like the rest of the team was. No, I'm just kidding. We'll get there. So I came in about the second quarter, and the reason for that, though, is because, again, like I said before, I cover high school football. The television show of which the high school football show is produced for and airs, it starts at 10:45 p.m. and ends around midnight, basically. And so my day on Fridays starts at like 5 o'clock. I show up about an hour and a half before kickoff. I shoot the game. And then after the game, I'm obviously making sure everything is good to go for the show. And then I have to, obviously stick around for the show to make sure anything or everything is going smoothly. And then after the show, I have to edit the raw highlights. So I have to, put together all the plays that I shot and then upload it. So by the end of the day, I'm usually done around 2 a.m., we'll say. And then, unfortunately, this last Friday, the day before yesterday, I didn't eat all day. So I had a late dinner, obviously, after the game, and after I left the studio to head home to edit the highlight clips, I had dinner, and then I edited the highlight clips. So I didn't really get to bed till about 3, probably 4 a.m. And so in this case, the inverse of last year, where I would be in bed at 5:30 p.m. and having to get up at 2 a.m., I had to work all the way then, and unfortunately, with 3 to 4 hours of sleep, it was hard for me to get up by the time the kickoff eventually happened at Northwestern. So it was a different kind of struggle for me with an early kickoff. So I missed the first quarter, though it seemed like Betcher made a nice play and got an interception. And, Oregon scored a touchdown from that, I believe. and then sort of the rest is history. But I caught 3 out of the 4 quarters, and I think that's enough to get sort of my assessment for this recap of the game. And watched a few highlights here and there. So I'm not doing complete box score checking, if you will. So I think that the early kickoff wasn't the biggest deal for the team. Mostly. I think there was a little bit of lethargy. Naturally, that comes from the fact that it was a game that really had no atmosphere, not a huge crowd. Again, equivalent and maybe not even really to your average Southern California high school game, which has some real freaks of nature for fans in the best way possible. So it sort of was kind of seeming like a weird, like, practice or scrimmage in a way, and not because the game was so lopsided and Northwestern was so bad that that's what it was. It was more like the atmosphere was that. And so I think naturally because of that, the sort of psychology of the game was a little bit lethargic. I think the Ducks did come out a little lethargic, and again, rightfully so. And because it's an early kickoff, different time zones. I believe Chicago is in the Eastern time zone block, and early morning kickoff, crazy weather, no atmosphere. You're just not going to be super juiced for that. But again, not necessarily an excuse. And let's go with starting off with this. A win is a win. Bottom line, you win the game, that's great. That's something to build on. Even if you played bad, a win is a win. And I can't tell you how many times, like I've said before, in my playing days, I got yelled, I and the rest of my team got yelled at more when we won than when we lost by coaches. So let's give that caveat first. A win is a win. And generally, with the talent gap that is there, sometimes you just have to weather the storm, pardon the pun, to have to sort of wait out the wave of the other team, and you still pull away anyway. So let's get that caveat out of the bag, because again, I don't want any dummies with green and yellow glasses telling me, that, I don't know what I'm necessarily talking about or whatever, blah, 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 okay? All of that is sort of baked into the cake here, and then we will move on from there, okay? Because this was I think overall this was a good game for many reasons. And let's start. Deer Hill, obviously, just amazing in nearly every way you could possibly have. He's on a heater right now. Great. Obviously, the defense shut out Northwestern until the fourth quarter, all the way through the third quarter, I should say. The game was 34-0 at the start of the fourth quarter. There wasn't really a whole lot Northwestern can do. Again, they sort of just got outlasted. And so that was good on the box score. And Dante Moore. Let's go with Dante Moore just a little bit deeper for now. Dante Moore played pretty well. It wasn't anything spectacular, and he did finally throw his first interception of the season. But again, it seemed like the ball was sort of underthrown because maybe the winds kind of picked it up. And that was sort of the factor that the wind played into it, because he underthrew to Corian Moore. And look, it wasn't At the same time, it wasn't the best decision he probably could have made. He threw it into multiple coverage, but I think where he intended to throw that ball, the coverage wasn't there, and DeCorian Moore had a chance to obviously run under that ball and catch it for a touchdown. But those types of throws, you need to be able to factor in if the wind is really that bad. You need to be able to factor in that throw might not be possible and just make the guaranteed stuff, because you just don't know. That's a slight mental error on that. So I'm not necessarily going to weigh heavily against Dante Moore on that play, and it was sort of obviously after the game was sort of out of reach for Northwestern anyway. So no harm, no foul necessarily on that. His biggest contribution, though, was, during the period of time in the game that the offense kind of wasn't feeling it, the run game was kind of stuttering and not quite getting there. There wasn't really great runs or anything quite yet. He was the spark. He sort of took over and was getting that offense going despite itself. He's like, okay, we're getting 1 to 2 yards a carry. Guess what? I'm throwing for first downs on third and longs, third and mediums, second and long, so on and so forth. He's like, I'm getting this offense to the end zone, whether they like it or not. And again, that's a sign of a player that is able to play under pressure, that doesn't crumble under pressure, and a sign of a leader. And so that was a good sign to see from him in this game, because Northwestern was trying to play that game we all remember from Stanford. It's sort of the nerd thing, the sound football or, old, because it's Northwestern, which is, called the Harvard of the Midwest, they're the nerds, right? They're not great athletes, but, for some reason they play a certain team and they just have their number, and, they have the kid in the glasses on the sideline drawing up the annexation of Puerto Rico type of thing. It's just like, why are these guys always out playing us? That type of thing. And so that was Northwestern's sort of intention and game plan was, we're going to chew up the clock. We're going to run the ball, and we're going to have the time of possession be so lopsided that Oregon can't run up the score. And when your offense is sitting out on, there's sort of a line that you cross. So you start off with offense is on the field too much, they're gassed and tired. Offense is not on the field too much, that they all have fresh legs when they're in and they're in rhythm. And then you have where they're sitting on the bench so long because the opposing team's offense can't get off the field or won't get off the field, and it throws you out of rhythm, and your legs are not only fresh but jello, it's just the atrophy of not being on the field. So Northwestern was trying to put you over that line where the atrophy was going to set in, where the offense sat so long that they were going to be rusty and they were going to be out of rhythm and that type of thing. And they were also trying to obviously put up together long drives that ended up in scores too. Now, Northwestern couldn't really finish those drives, but it was obviously starting to sort of throw the whole team off of rhythm because of that. And I think it was a solid enough game plan that it was getting obviously scary for a while, that some fans were worried about a purple Stanford, if you will. And the crux of that, though, again, everything comes down to defense. Defense, defense, defense. And I've been saying this since the day Tosh Lupoi came on to the scene. And then I've been saying this over the course of last year and then all off season. I think Tosh Lupoi's seat is getting warm. And it's starting to get a little warmer, I feel like, as time goes on. Because from day one, it doesn't matter who he has. He has dogs on the D-line. I mean, big guys, athletic guys, strong guys, talented guys. I mean, he's working with 4- and 5-star monsters, physical monsters. And somehow the Oregon is still struggling with stopping the run. And again, like, this is the separation between the green and yellow glasses Ducks, because they say, 34-14 and 34-0 in the third quarter. That's great. What a great game. I don't see a sloppy game played. But when you actually look at the game, you realize the Ducks gave up 179 yards rushing. And the last 79 came on a 79-yard touchdown against, in garbage time versus Oregon backups. But even the backups should be not giving that kind of play up. Especially to Northwestern. And guess what? They had Northwestern running back backups in. And they struggled to stop the run. The best way to negate or mitigate a Stanford or Northwestern game plan is to stop the run. Make them throw. And clearly, Mixon, by the way, is becoming a crazy star already. I mean, he's playing out of his mind lately. And gets another pick with a great return. I thought he was going to house that. Betcher had a pick before him. So clearly, the game plan is to sell out for the run and make Preston Stone throw. Because, again, the secondary in this game, despite giving up a few more explosive plays, they were, again, the shining star of this defense this game. The most consistent, at least. And the team coverage. So clearly the game plan should have been make them think they can't run. Make them throw, because we dare you to throw. But they couldn't stop the run. They could not stop the run. And it's not necessarily like some people were saying Northwestern O-line was pushing around the D-line. Probably a good chunk of that. I haven't looked too closely at the tape yet. But the biggest problem is a schematic issue. So it doesn't matter even if the D-line was getting a push against the O-line anyway. That's not even relevant necessarily, because the teams are out, the players are out of position. Like, literally, the 79-yard run, everybody clumped in the middle. And then when some of the secondary members or the coverage guys were trying to make up for the fact that they all got dogged in the middle and try to bring it back outside, they were taking terrible angles. And the running back just ran around everybody. Why not? It's wide open right over there. The corners gave up the sidelines. The safeties didn't play up and play out either. Filling those gaps, they allowed him to get the sideline, and after he turned that corner, he's gone because your pursuit angles were that bad. So it's not even necessary. Again, it's not a talent thing. It's not, necessarily a dominant performance by the Northwestern side. It's a scheme thing. I don't know what it's going to take for Tosh Lupoi to stop the run. And the thing is again, the green and yellow glasses people will say, oh, well, so what? We won, blah, blah, blah. But then there's also the same people that are like, ooh, how did we get dog walked in the playoffs? How come we always fall short of the national championships? And they're surprised that they don't, somehow we always finish just short. As they're the same ones calling, saying we're so natty this year in the regular season. It's because they don't look at those things against the bad teams or the underqualified teams. Northwestern's not as bad either. I think they're better than Oklahoma State at this point. And that's why I say the last game was a question of whether is Oklahoma State that bad, or is Oregon that good, or both? Because giving up 179 yards to Northwestern, what's that going to translate into accounting for the inflation of playing Penn State? And how are you going to beat Penn State if they rush for 179 yards even? We gave up over 200 to them in last year in the Big Ten championship. All the teams that had a chance of beating us rushed for over 150 yards. Ashton Jonty himself last year against Boise State. We barely beat them. It took a few miracles that game. A few. A Tez Johnson punt return, a Noah Whittington kickoff return, and a last-second field goal by Atticus Sappington. And he gave up an 80-yarder, 75, 80-yarder to Jonty. That was the go-ahead play. That seemed like the game was over at that point, or close to over. When the Ducks beat Ohio State by 1 point in the regular season, they actually shut down the run. That wasn't the case in the Rose Bowl either, because they still ran all over Oregon after Will Howard and Jeremiah Smith were done carving us up in the coverage. These are problems. These are problems. They need to be addressed before you play good teams. Because those good teams are going to see that and exploit it, and they're actually going to execute it better than the bad teams. And that's when you lose. And don't act surprised when you do. So all that being said, I think this was overall a good, positive outcome, though. Because we learned that we're learning this lesson before Northwestern. But, God dang it, it's up to Tosh Lupoy to figure this out and learn that lesson before, again, there's another high consequence lesson to be learned. I've been saying the past year or so, just imagine what Nick Aliotti could do with the talent that they have on the team now. Nick Aliotti, he, of course, was the bend but don't break guy, but he sort of had to scheme out the bend but don't break because he didn't have the talent or as much talent as we have now. He probably wouldn't be running the bend but don't break scheme with the level of talent that he has now. And he was a master schemer as a defensive coordinator. He blitzed. He did everything, really. So I can only imagine what he could do with this roster. And I don't hate Lupoy. I think he's a great recruiter. I think he should probably still be on the staff, but he's got to get help somewhere in stopping the run, especially because it's like Dan Lanning was the defensive coordinator for Georgia during the not the national championship years. I think he just missed it, but he made himself into who he was as a defensive coordinator. Like, this should be both Tosh's and Dan's bread and butter, but the most bread and butter of their bread and butter, they're not executing. So it's like, we got to do something. Something's got to give with the run game. We're giving up all those yards, and especially at very, key times. I mean, Oregon had a shutout and they gave up 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. And again, the caveat is that it's garbage time. But that shouldn't be happening. It really shouldn't. Okay. I think that's all I have to say about that in the sense of the actual sort of gameplay. Mateo got his. Tatum got his. Tatum Tuioti got his. Mixon. Everyone sort of ate on defense still, though. The problem is just the run game. So we're going to take a small, tiny break, and then we will come back for more Northwestern versus Oregon.
To their sideline. Touchdown, Oregon!
All right, welcome back to the show. I apologize for the small break. Eventually, it's probably going to be a commercial for my buddy's company, Six Pack Skateboards. Support your local skate shop, everybody. Support small business. And most importantly, support your friends. Okay, so run game, not great at all. Not great. Lots to improve on that. Not bad, but not great either. I would probably say mid. Mid would be the perfect description of that. It wasn't mediocre and it wasn't above average. It was absolutely mid. There were bright, small, bright moments where we could be a run-stopping defense, but the other times we just gave up too much. And so this is part of the portion, though, and leading into what I've been repeatedly saying for, I guess, a couple years now since I started this show, but obviously I've been off and on with this show for quite a while after now being more consistent with it. And I've also obviously went on my diatribe a few weeks ago or a month ago or whatever during the off season. Been saying this in the off season, but not. So you get the 34-14 win. I'm not gonna acknowledge the gamblers that are mad because it didn't cover the spread. I'm more mad about the gameplay, or not mad, I should say, but you know what I mean. I'm more in critique of the gameplay and the actual game results and why the games were in that result. I don't care about the spread. But this is where the Duck fans separate from the realistic fans to the Pollyanna green and yellow glasses fans. And obviously in the last segment, I'm hinting at it with the fact that they look at the score and just say, wow, that's a great game played. But this is why coaching and who you hire as a coach is so freaking important. Because I'll tell you what, that attitude, that Pollyanna attitude for the Ducks was created, one, when the team was not that good and was getting not that good to good and then good to better, that, you know, when you're the abused spouse, you kind of accept a lower standard. Oh, well, he didn't hit me today. He's a good guy today. But no, the rest of the time he's hitting you. Leave the guy, you know? And that's kind of the attitude that developed from the losing programs that Oregon has put out in the past. Those are sort of now the older. I'm unfortunately right in the middle that became a fan once, like very shortly after or even during Oregon's turnaround and finally getting good and better And also during the years, obviously, through that time that they had dips, the season that got Helfrich fired and the 500 seasons after near miss seasons, magical seasons, all that kind of thing. And then obviously into the era now where a 10-win season is basically expected and not a huge history-making thing anymore. It's like after how many 10-win seasons, I can say, wow, this is a great thing for the program. Because you got to be breaking new grounds every time you go, and Dan Lanning has done that. He started off with a 10-win season, and then a Fiesta Bowl, I believe. Or was it the Fiesta? When did Bo Nix's first season? We went to the Alamo Bowl, I think, actually. Was the Alamo Bowl? Because I think Bo Nix's last game was a Fiesta Bowl against Liberty. Whatever bowl game before. I'm pretty sure it might have been the Alamo Bowl. And then you go to the Bo Nix final season. You go to the Fiesta Bowl and win it. An 11-win season from a 10-win season before. And then you go 13-0, win the Big Ten in your first year in the conference. You get to the playoffs, and then you get blasted in the playoffs. So now, obviously, the next step was the improvement from that. Maybe winning a playoff game. So Dan Lanning has it. I just don't know about Tosh Lupoi. But here's the thing, though. We got so used to guys like Chip Kelly and Mike Bellotti. And again, there's no shade necessarily. Don't take this as shade at them. Because again, where the program was with Bellotti, he was doing the same thing Lanning was. He was taking this program to new heights. He got the first 10-win season. Bellotti started off with the first consecutive bowl seasons, taking the team to bowl games more than just once every 30 years or whatever. And then he got him like the first 10-win season. And then he got, to BCS games. And then he was the guy that led the way for Chip Kelly. And Chip Kelly finally got a Rose Bowl win for the first time in 95 years. And consistent BCS bowl game bursts. And actually got to the national championship. And fell short by a field goal. And then it sort of led to Helfrich, which Mariota carried that team to a national championship. They fell short, and then they started dipping. And then it became a carousel of coaches that was Stepping Stone U for a while, Oregon. Taggart actually at least showed that, hey, you can go places that are a little different than Oregon was going and recruit guys. You can make the sales pitch for Oregon. And then he left, unfortunately. And there was a lot of issues with Taggart. But at least that's the one good thing that he brought to the table. And then Cristobal. He's Cristobal. But he still brought success to the program and was a drastic leap from Taggart because he was also a good recruiter. But he was also the one that changed the program to being a trenches team. But there was always something. Cristobal's game management was lacking, for sure. And then came Lanning, an SEC guy, finally. A lot of us fans were begging for an SEC guy. And he was a SEC guy from Georgia. So it's not like he wasn't an SEC guy from Vanderbilt, which is weird to say now because Vanderbilt's actually a pretty decent team, but you know what I mean. It wasn't a bottom-of-the-barrel SEC guy. It's like, finally. And then he was the defensive coordinator for a top-tier SEC team. And it was like, oh, my gosh, our dreams have come true. It's perfect. The situation we are in is perfect. Now, here's the thing, though. Half of these fans are still stuck in the Chip Kelly era. They think we're a Chip Kelly team with 5 stars now. That's not the case. You got to catch up. Lanning is not accepting this win. His exact soundbite was that the game left a sour taste in his mouth because of how the team played. They won by 20. They were up 34-0 at the start of the fourth quarter. And yet he's mad. He's pissed about the performance of the team. You know why? Because it's a standard thing. It's standards. You play to your standard. It's not empty words when he says it's Oregon versus Oregon. It's not marketing hype. It's not for social media. That's what he's talking about. It's a standard. The Oregon standard. And just because you win, it doesn't negate playing under your standard. And you know where that comes from? That comes from Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. But he comes from the Nick Saban tree of coaching and the Kirby Smart tree of coaching. There are compilations on YouTube where you look at the game and there's 45 seconds left in the game. And Alabama is up 30 points. And he's calling a timeout. And he's calling A.J. McCarron to the sidelines and tearing him 3 new and improved assholes. Because he's not doing or executing what he requires of his starting quarterback to do. And you think, oh, well, they're winning. The game's over. Who cares? No, because it's the Alabama standard. There's a way that Alabama under Nick Saban plays the game of football, and that's how they play until the clock says 0. And it doesn't even stop there because they're going to continue playing like that when they go to practice on Monday. That is what Dan Lanning is trying to establish in the Oregon football culture. And the fans need to understand that. The certain fans out there, they need to understand that. They need to pick up what Dan Lanning is doing and get on board. Half of you don't even know that the Lanning train even came through the station. And you're arguing and calling the rest of us disgraceful. And we're haters and we're pessimistic or whatever because we have bought into Lanning more than you. And we're talking about poor run defense, even though we won by 20 by the end of the game. And we understand completely. Garbage time this, third string, fourth string that. Game wasn't close this, pitched a shutout until the third quarter that. We understand all of it. But you can't play to what you perceive to be your standard for 3 quarters and just let that go away in the fourth or the end. You finish strong. I can't tell you how many times I have heard the phrase finish strong from coaches, my parents, teachers, everybody. Finishing strong is important. And that's what Lanning was trying to say. And that's why fans even, were not super happy with this last weekend, even though we won. What's great is that you can win by 20 after playing like that. It is a luxury to play at a C, C-, C+, C+, however you want to grade it, a mid-level game, not your standard of game, and still win by 20. Because at least you don't have the consequence of losing. And losing to a team like Northwestern. Again, no shade to Northwestern, but what I'm saying is Northwestern's nice. They're nice. I like them. actually. But I'm just saying a bad team in terms of your resume. When all the dummies at the AP polls and all the dummies on television are deciding whether or not you get in the playoffs and you have a loss like that on your record, that's bad. So it is a nice luxury you have the ability to win and still win convincingly even when you play like that. But that does not negate fixing the way that you play. Because the people like that are the ones that skate by on doing the minimum. I've been that person before. And you do the minimum just because it works for a while until it doesn't. And oftentimes it's going to be people that are better than you, bigger, stronger, better in life and on the football field. They're going to serve you a nice, hearty slice of humble freaking pie. And it's going to feel way worse than just fixing the sloppy play even when you won. So I am not talking smack about these Oregon fans. They are fellow Oregon fans, all right? They are in the family. They're in the community. All I'm asking, imploring you is to pick up what's going on and understand. And Oregon played largely okay. I mean, again, the negatives are there though. That's it. And to all you guys that dig your heels in and won't take off the green, yellow glass Pollyanna glasses, I sincerely hope you don't have friends and family that are alcoholics or drug addicts. Because I know exactly how you're going to handle them and how they're going to have to move forward in life. Enablers. I don't know why I got so heated on that. I don't know. I think I am just frustrated with for some reason Tosh Lupoi does not have that Rubik's Cube of the running game solved. And that is, I mean, if you want to win a national championship, which is the goal here, even if it's not this year, but the short to long term, mid to long term goal, you got to be able to stop the run. You just got to, because that is the foundation of a defense. You could have a top 5 defense, but if you let people run all over you, you won't have a top 5 defense for long. But for sure, that's not going to be a championship winning defense. Because even if there's a team that doesn't really run the ball well or run the ball at all, they're just going to say, you know what? We're going to take our chances running on these guys and not even worry about throwing to an elite secondary or whatever if they got it. Obviously, they would have to if they had a terrible run defense and had a top 5 defense. It probably would be because of an elite secondary. It's like, why take that risk if you can just hand off to your running back, even if the running back is mid? Again, all it takes, 3 yards of carry. That's all it takes for a successful run game. 3 yards of carry. You run twice, 3 yards of carry, that's 6 yards. You're at 3rd and 4. 4 yards of carry, 2 plays, that's 3rd and 2. So 3 yards of carry is really all it takes. All you have to do is run a short route. You got a first down. And you just keep doing that over and over and over again. So this is definitely something that has to be figured out, and especially figured out against a team like Penn State, because they are a run team. And last year, our secondary was not as good as the secondary last year was often lucky until the luck ran out. And it was really exposed in the Big Ten championship because a guy like Drew Aller, I align with the people that are not really fully bought in on Drew Aller. And Drew Aller picked apart Oregon's secondary that game. We made him look like Tom Brady. So you got to be able to stop the run on that. I would much rather take my chances on stopping the run and forcing Drew Aller to be a playmaker that makes plays and win games than them just being able to let Aller sit back and watch the running backs win them a game. Because Drew Aller doesn't really have the resume to be that guy so far. He hasn't won a game with his arm. He hasn't really done much of that. So if you take the load off of him and let the guys run all over you as a defense, you're way more screwed. Way more screwed. And be ready. You know, some people with the big ticket games that Oregon's been in, you know, Ohio State, Texas this year, they said the same thing, that it was going to be a shootout. It was going to be 44-41. This is why I hate score predictions, because it never turns out that way. Oftentimes it's a defensive battle. Oftentimes. So that's sort of how I imagine the Penn State-Oregon game to be. I don't think it's going to be a shootout necessarily. It could be. Last year it was. But that was probably more of an outlier than anything else. I think this one's going to be a bit of a defensive battle. I think Oregon's offense is going to get stopped a little bit in Happy Valley. It's just the nature of the game, the way it works out. And Penn State's not necessarily a barn-burning offense unless they're able to run. Tosh Lupoy needs to figure that out. Figure it out fast and figure it out permanently. Because there's going to be a time where it's going to be one big game too many. One time that Oregon falls short too many, that eventually the spotlight's really going to lock on the reason why, and it's going to be Tosh Lupoy and his inability to stop the run. He's not a bad defensive coordinator, but he has a huge weak spot that keeps getting exploited, and it hasn't changed. It's got to get figured out. And luckily, thank God, it was against Northwestern that this season that has been figured out. But now how do you move forward from here? So far it's been a fun season. I swear I'm not being negative. I'm not being negative. I promise. This is a fun season so far. From here on out, it probably shouldn't be expected we're going to hang up 60 points on every team. That was fun while it lasted. Now it's something new. Now we got to make sure we beat the teams we play and play well up to the standard. And I know for a while Oregon has had people that have been there not long enough to establish a standard, so we were an identity-less team. Frankly, with Rich, Brooks, and Bellotti, it was kind of like we're just changing it as much as we can with each roster we get, because we have to take who we can get and perform, and that's what makes them legendary coaches. And then Chip Kelly was more like, yeah, we have this system, and the identity sort of became faster than everyone else. And then people figured that out, and Chip Kelly hasn't really been phenomenal at adapting until recently and had great success at Ohio State. But there was no identity other than faster than everyone else. So what do you do when you're not? And then Helfrich, it kind of went to be like, I don't know really what I'm doing. I'm just trying to follow what Chip Kelly was doing. And then with Taggart, it was do something and swag and all that. And that was cool for a bit. And then he left, and it was like, okay, yeah. Cristobal finally was like, we're going to be a running trenches team. And then I'm going to handle games poorly, management-wise. And then finally Lanning says, you know what? We're going to be the SEC of the West. And we're going to play football that has been long time successful. So that's the identity of the team. So make your software update as a fan. That's the identity of the team. What are we doing? This is what we're doing. What do we need to do to get there? This is what we need to do. Let's do it. I mean, after the Rose Bowl last year, I was like, you know what? Let's just have mesh plain green jerseys and plain yellow helmets until we win something. Till we win the big one. No more uniform reveals, nothing. I was pissed. Like everyone else, but I was pissed. Because also, not only, again, if we had lost to Ohio State in an inverse way that we won at Autzen in the regular season against Ohio State, if we lost by a last-second slide and lost by 1 point, I would not have been as pissed. And it wasn't even the blowout that pissed me off. It was the way that the team played. They were so much better than that. So, I think the team played not great against Northwestern, but the outcomes on all sides of things were absolutely positive. And there's good things to look for in the sense that every gray cloud has a silver lining. And the silver lining is we still won, and we still won against a team that found some holes in the team's logic to poke. And we were able to find those holes in the logic while winning. And now it's time that we are able to improve them. And if we improve them and then execute those improvements, not we, but the Ducks, execute those improvements, it can only get better. And it can only get better during more consequential moments. So I am very glad. This was sort of what I was looking at Oklahoma State hopefully to do in week 2, because the sooner it happens, the better. But hey, week 3 Northwestern Conference game, why not? So I think that this was a good weekend. And here's the thing, too, about this last weekend. Honestly, I think Dante Moore sort of himself shined this weekend, because the quarterback play around college football this weekend was bad. Klubnik played bad, and it seems like he's not really as good as advertised. Lagway threw 5 picks, really bad. Arch Manning played bad. And that seems like another Klubnik situation where not as good as advertised. Sayan played okay, but Ohio kind of stuck with Ohio State for a good chunk of that game. But it wasn't really quarterback play that really, took him out. The true freshman at Notre Dame did true freshman things, and that's just the case of what happens. But the quarterback play, Nussmeier, just the quarterback play in general was mediocre. It was not good this weekend. And Dante Moore didn't really have this steep drop in anything like that. He still played relatively consistent to how Dante Moore and Oregon plays on that front. And again, he was sort of the reason that lit the spark of Oregon's offense in that game, and he was being a leader. So that's good. Bear Alexander was more of a force, I think, than the last couple games, at least more outwardly, where he was getting some attention for it. There were small moments where they played decent against the run. The Ducks had 2 interceptions. The secondary played mostly pretty well, except for a few explosive plays that really need to get cleaned up. And Naeem Offord kind of struggled this game, but everyone's going to have a bad game. Again, there is good things to say about Oregon's play, but Dan Lanning's right. There was a bit of a sour taste. Around the third to fourth quarter, I was like, we need to get this game over with now. Like, I'm glad they brought in Moga and Brock Thomas but again, we couldn't run the ball enough. Even with the second, third, fourth string guys, we weren't that dominant where we could run the ball and run out the clock faster. There were 3 and outs that led to Northwestern's touchdowns. The offense couldn't preserve the shutout, and the defense couldn't preserve the shutout. And Oregon was probably arguably more talented. Their second to third stringers were probably still more talented than Northwestern, but they couldn't get the job done. And that was the problem. So that's why it was like, all right, let's just run the clock out. Let's not get cute with it. Let's just run the clock out, get this game over, because it was a weird vibe. You know what I mean? And again, it was kind of a weird vibe around college football the whole weekend, and the Ducks were a part of it. So now it's just like, you know what? We did plenty to win this game. Let's get this game over and then regroup. So that's what needs to happen. But otherwise, still a fun weekend of football. Unfortunately, it finished off with a super boring game with Atlanta and Minnesota Vikings on Sunday Night Football. Every time I watch Sunday Night Football, I watched it a couple times last year, at least once because the Seahawks and the Niners were playing. I like both teams. And again, I still don't really watch much NFL. I usually just watch sort of the regional teams and big games because it's just all the commercial breaks, and college football's catching up on that. But anyway, and plus the NFL is just, again, it's just, I don't know. They try to slow the game down as much as possible, and I don't mind a slower game, but I hate that it's artificially slowed down, if that makes sense. And it was a slog of a game. And I wanted to turn it off, but I managed to finish it. But as far as college football goes, fun weekend. Some good games out there. Some good teams. No one, honestly, is really sticking out as far as the best team in the country, even though Joel Klatt tried to pull his announcer, sportscaster jinx on Oregon by calling us the best team in the country already in week 2 before this game. And then he called the game too himself, and he was talking about how good Dante Moore was, and then Dante threw his pick. So stop talking about it. I like the AP polls came out today. Oregon dropped from number 4 to number 6. I'm okay with that. If we hover from about 6 to number 9, perfect. No one's talking about us winning it all already in the regular season. It's like, how many times do we have to go through this? It's like Cowboy fans thinking they're going to win it every year, and they don't. That's what the Ducks. That's what it feels like being a Duck fan right now. Stop saying we're going to win it all. AP polls out. What are your thoughts? Oh, we should have stayed the same or gone up just because it's my team and not dropped at all. Or what's the point of getting mad about the rankings? Seriously, what's it do? Winning will solve that question. And the most important time to be number 1 is in mid of January. That's all I care about. And I care about that they play well in the meantime. I care that they keep winning enough to get in the playoffs, and they get on a heater in the playoffs, and they go on a run, and they become that buzzsaw in the playoffs, and they finally finish it off and finish it off as number 1. That's all that matters. All that other chatter is just that. Dumb chatter. Talking about how they play is certainly much more substantive than talking about how they're ranked. The best thing that at least rankings provide, especially after this whole AP poll scandal with the pollster that's like, I just look at the box scores and make my rankings there. Or just choose the blue bloods over everyone else versus how the teams actually played on the field. the only thing the rankings really do is sort of group together those tiers and really assess, where they're at. And not even super accurately, but it at least still gives a general barometer. And it's unfortunate you sort of have to have those rankings because you got to have those rankings so then those teams play against each other and you can sort of go from there, somewhat of a starting point, especially after the NIL era, but even before that. Like, this is full on. Every West Coast fan should be happy that the rankings and the pollsters are getting exposed, because we've been saying this for years about the East Coast bias. And now it's sort of coming into full force. So, because, you do have, especially when you get up to the top teams, like 1 through 5, let's say, you have to have some sort of differentiating factor. But that differentiating factor happens in the game once you make them play each other. It certainly doesn't work to do everything after the fact, too, like in the old days where the AP polls would choose the national champion and there wouldn't be a national championship game played. Because then it's really bias-based. But yeah, but generally, who cares? Like, Nick Saban said it right, too. That's rat poison. Who cares about poll watching? Watch the teams play. At least your team. If you want them to be successful, who cares about the polls? Make sure that's why you establish a standard on your team. Because you want to make sure they're playing to their standard and having success at their standard. Because then the rest will play it all self out. If Oregon's truly the best team in the country and they play like the best team in the country, they will end the season as the best team in the country. And that is the best proof that they were. Not people talking about rankings and who they think is sort of the best team in the country that day. Because it changes, clearly. Because the Oregon Ducks did not play like the best team in the country this last Saturday. So, that is the beautiful positive outcome, though, that came from this last week. And I know I've said that multiple times in a row, but I still feel like I have to reinforce this because I'm sure there are plenty of dummies out there that will say I'm just being a negative Nancy. But I'm trying to illustrate that this is the iron sharpening iron. This is the thing that will create the positive outcome and the good things. The first step of having a problem is admitting it, and then once you admit it and solve the problem, then it's not a problem. And that's why this is great, and it came at a very low consequence moment, and that is the best and most positive scenario that you could have with that. So let me just remind you to rewind what I just freaking said in the last 20 seconds, so then I don't get stupid comments that says otherwise. That is all. That's the only reason why I'm repeating myself on that, and just want to reiterate that overall, I am happy with the way things worked out this weekend. And it's always fun watching the Oregon Ducks play, and it's always fun making a show for you guys to watch. And with that, I will see you later, and have a good week, and have a good night if you're still awake, and we will see you over the course of this week as we look forward to the Civil War game against the Beavers, the last game that we will have after probably a year of pause and we returning back to them. And so should be fun to have a fun in-state rivalry game again. So thank you for watching.